Alright, just wanted to do a quick video on exporting from Blender 2.8 into Unity 3D. So I've got a project in here. I've created an empty folder called models, and I'm just looking to get my amazing Blender model into Unity. So I'm gonna delete this cube, and I'm gonna use the monkey. You'll see here that the monkey is facing, it's got the x-axis, which is the red one, through the right and left. It's got the y-axis going through its nose, and the blue z-axis is going through the head. You can see if you just click the transform tool. So I'm just going to export this just straight up as a Blender file. So I'm just going to click File and Save. I'm going to find the project, and you'll see the project is made up of a lot of files. Inside of Assets, there's my Models folder, exactly as you would see it inside of Unity. So I've opened up the models folder, and I'm just going to name it down here, and because it's a monkey, I'm going to call it monkey. I'm going to spell it correctly, and save the Blender file. Now you'll notice that there's a camera and a light in this. If you have the camera and the light in there, and you have the Blender file, once this is imported, you'll see here is monkey, and it's also got the camera and the light. Now the import options, if you click it once, the import options come up here, and one of the easiest ways to do this is to simply get rid of the tick boxes for import camera and import lights, and click apply, and you'll see that it'll just create empty game objects for these. And if you drag that object onto your scene, you'll see that it's orientated kind of correctly, in that the way it looks right now is exactly the way it looked inside of Blender. Under the hood, it's actually the mesh itself has got the same orientation as it has inside of Blender, in that the blue axis points up through the head, right and left, and the y-axis is negative. So that's one of the easiest ways to export. The pros of this is pretty simple. You can see that this file that I have right here, if I close the Blender file right now, you can see that this file, if I double click it, it will open up in Blender, and I'll be able to see the exact same model as I have inside of Unity. So it keeps things nice and synchronized, and if you make some changes to this, if I make a nice simple change to this, make it so he's got a head like this, and if I save it again, because I opened up the one that's inside of the assets folder, if I jump back to Unity, it'll re-import, and you'll see the changes that the model that you made in Blender are synchronized into your Unity project. So that is one of the easiest ways to get models from Blender into Unity. Alright, welcome back to the second part now. This is when we have textures and materials. Now I've clearly spent a lot of time on this wonderful Suzanne texture. When you have the texture and the Blender file, they are not by default included with each other. So what you need to make sure you do is that you save the texture and the Blender file in the same place. So if you're going to use the method I showed earlier, where we save the Blender file straight into the project folder, then you need to make sure that we do these two things. So here's my my save. I'm straight into my assets and models folder, and I'm going to call this one Suzanne, because that's the name of it, and I'm going to save the Blender file. Now you'll notice that over on the right hand side here I have a material called Suzanne material, and that has the texture. Now I did texture through texture paint over here, so you'll see over this is the texture that's attached to this object. If you click image, you need to save that image. So if you haven't saved it already and you click save, it'll ask you where you want to save it. Now because I've saved my Blender file inside this models folder, it will by default, it will automatically choose the same location as the Blender file is saved, to save the PNG material, so PNG texture. So if I save this image right now and jump straight into Unity, what you'll see inside my models folder you'll see that there is the texture folder and there is the Suzanne model. By default, often it doesn't quite get it right in that the model is there, but it doesn't seem to have the texture. If I put this, forgot to delete the old one, so if I put Suzanne out on, you'll see that it's, I haven't done the import options either, but you'll see that it hasn't got the texture on it. So let's look at the import options so that we can fix that. I'll just delete this from the scene right now. So we'll look at the import options first. So the model, I don't want any cameras and I don't want any lights. They'll just come in as empties and I can delete them later. If you want, by the way, if you want colliders, so if you need to turn this into a rigid body at some point, you can generate the colliders here, or you can use primitive colliders. The rig doesn't have a rig, so it hasn't imported it. On this occasion I don't have any animations, so I'm going to untick animations, and then right here in the material tab, often it doesn't quite get this texture right, and so I've found that this works quite often. The on-demand remap, if you tick this down and click search and remap, it'll search for that texture, and sometimes it will work. If it doesn't work, what you can do in here is you can, I'll apply those changes. You can extract this material from the model, and you do that from this inside the import options, the materials. So if you click extract materials, and I'll choose the same location to extract the materials to, and it just takes it out of the project, out of the file, and puts it right next to it. So the Suzanne material right now needs this texture on the albedo channel, and I'll just drag it from there onto there. You'll see the material is right. So the Suzanne object now should be correctly textured because it still has that same Suzanne material attached to it. So dragging it out, I know it looks a bit weird right now, but if you drag it onto your scene, you'll see that the material is correct. So this works exactly like you would expect it to. We are able to save the project, and this, as long as if you make changes to the material, just don't forget to save those as well. So if I was to draw somewhere on this, up here on the top left hand side where it says image, you'll see there's a little star. That just means that it's not saved. So just clicking save again, I think I drew some, what did I do? I drew some lines on its ears. Going back to Unity, you'll see that those will appear. So you've kept those in sync. Alright, this is part 3, some of the frequent problems that you'll have when you're importing. So I've got this the model that I had before, and here's something that you would think would be sensible. If you delete both the camera and the light, and then you save the Blender file, you'd think that would be a sensible thing. If you do that, and I've saved the Blender file, I haven't actually saved the texture, so I should probably do that too. So image, save as, and save. So jumping back into Unity again, you'll see that we have, on this occasion, it managed to do it. It mapped it correctly, so the model does work. Oops, I accidentally double clicked that. Bringing it out onto the scene, you'll see that now we don't have a hierarchy of objects that we had previously. So we just simply have the mesh, because that's all that was on the scene, so it saved it simply as a mesh. The other weird thing that you'll notice is that the orientation is wrong. So setting this to a 0 orientation, you'll see that we have it sort of, I don't know if you'd call this correct or incorrect, but we have it so that the blue axis goes straight up through the head. Now the blue axis inside of Unity is forward, so it's the forward direction in the Y, sorry, in the X, Z, but it's different to the one it is in Blender. So if we look at the transform tool, we'll see that they are the same, they are exactly the same, but the up in Blender is forward in Unity. So we still have the blue going up through the head, and the green going through the back of the head, and the red going to out the ear. it is exactly the same in here, and in order to fix that, it's actually a -90° orientation inside of Unity, which can cause its own problems. But you'll see that it's pretty much exactly the same as it is. The x-axis goes the opposite direction, and positive x goes the opposite direction. So that's one of the things. It's not the end of the world, and all of these things can be fixed. This one is often quite good, because it's a simple mesh. It's often quite good as a rigid body, and to add the rigid body, you'll see this is one of the other common problems. If you need this to be a physical body with a collider, inside the import options, you'll see that the model option has a generate colliders. If we apply those changes, the collider should have been generated. You'll see here there's a mesh collider that's been generated for the model, and if you need it to be a rigid body, you must have this set to convex, and you'll see that that tries to approximate the shape as best it can. By giving this a convex mesh collider, adding a rigid body to this object will give it physics and collision. So I'll leave the mass as 1. I'll quickly add a cube of 50 by 50 on the x, y and z is 0, and if you hit play in your game, you'll see that the because it has a rigid body and a collider, it will collide with objects correctly. I'm pretty sure that's most of the things that you will come up with. One tip when using Blender, if you want to be able to model like this and have it come up correctly, a couple of ways of doing it is you could model it, and then before saving, you go to the side view, you rotate it by 90 degrees by typing in R and then 90. I really should have my screencast keys on for this. So if you rotate it by 90 degrees, you'll have it facing up, but what you have to do is apply the rotation and scale. So Control A will allow you to apply rotation, and that Control A, rotation, scale or location can all be applied. What that does is that zeroes out the rotation and location, so that you and the scale, so the scale gets set to 1 by default, so that it doesn't export weird when it goes into Unity. So it's Blender thinks that this is a rotation of 0, 0, 0. You'll see that the blue axis, the forward, goes through the nose on this occasion. Saving the file and going back into Unity, you'll see that the orientation does get fixed. So this Suzanne object with a rotation of 0, 0 and 0 will face exactly as you'd expect it to face, as it faced inside of Blender. Just in case this is maybe a little bit too confusing, what you can do if you want to keep modeling with this but keep the rotation as it is, what you can do is, because you've zeroed out the rotation right now, if you go back to the side view again, tap R and do -90, as long as you don't apply those rotations again, you can keep modeling with this, and the rotation will always be the 90 degrees on the X that when it exports into Unity3d. So it will zero out again, so that the local coordinates will be the blue axis going through the nose, and the X going right and left, and the Y going up. So I know this probably seems a little bit confusing, but that's just what happens when you work with 3D. So hopefully that's some of the problems solved for you that you might come up against.